is Thomas Harvey. I'm the Master of Ceremonies today. We'll begin our program in about 5 minutes, so if you want to get more coffee or whatever, you'll be my guest. As your MC, I had the prerogative of telling a few jokes and singing a few songs. So if there's time, I will do that. Otherwise, yeah, you're out of luck. At this point, I will introduce the head table. To my far left is Father Michael McNamara, longtime pro-life priest. I can remember back in, I think it was like the early 90s or late 80s, when Father Mike was one of the Operation Rescue defendants at the Boston Municipal Court. So he is really dedicated. His position now, he's the founder and director of Servants of Christ in Scituate.
We've heard of that place.
Yeah. Next to Father is our honoree, Bill Cotter. You'll hear more about him later, but I can just tell you that I have never met anyone more dedicated to the pro-life cause than Bill Cotter. To my immediate left is Kobe Mazzarella, the president of the Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund. She also runs the Way of the Cross every year on Good Friday in Boston for many years. I think it's like 25 years she's been running that. To my immediate right is attorney Robert Joyce, past president of the Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund, past board member of Mass Citizens for Life. Bob is an excellent speaker. He goes around giving pro-life talks. You may have heard him. Next to Bob is attorney Patricia Stewart. Pat also gives pro-life talks. Her specialty is end-of-life issues. Next to Pat is Kathleen Scarpato. She's a board member of, as is Pat Stewart, a board member of Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund, and Kathleen is a board member of Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund. She's also the daughter of Ann and Roy Scarpato, two of the founders of Mass Citizens for Life. And Kathlena has put her name out there and has run for office for school committee up in Topsfield. So we give her credit for that. And at the far right is Ann Scarpato, widow of the great late Roy Scarpato. Ann and Roy were founders of Mass Citizens for Life. The original meetings were in their living room. And Ann is also a long time. Ann and Roy were also original founders of the Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund, and Ann was a long-time board member of Massachusetts Citizens for Life. As for myself, I'm a board member of the Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund, the treasurer, and also I am the chairman of the Mass Alliance to Stop Taxpayer-Funded Abortions. I'll speak a little bit about that more, but I want you to know that we're going to be holding a signature campaign this fall. We've got to collect 75,000 signatures to try to get on the ballot a measure to stop the public funding of abortion in Massachusetts. Right now it's a constitutional right because of a 1981 court decision, so we're trying to remove that as a constitutional right. All right, now before I go any further, there was a woman years ago who entered a convent, young woman, and it was an extremely strict convent. I mean really strict. One of the rules was you could only say 3 words every 10 years. So she joins the convent, 10 years go by, she's told you can go up and speak to the Mother Superior. She goes up, tells Mother Superior, bed, too hard. Mother Superior says, well, sister, that's just one of the sacrifices we have to make here. Unite your sufferings to those of the Lord. Go back to your room. So she goes back to her room. Another 10 years go by. She is told, go up, tell your Mother Superior your 3 words. So she does. She tells her, room, too cold. Mother Superior says, well, just offer it up. That's the way we live here. Go back to your room. So she goes back to her room. 10 more years go by. She's told, you can go up, see the Mother Superior. So she goes in and says, I quit. Mother Superior says, it doesn't surprise me. You've done nothing but complain ever since you got here. Now, one other religious-themed joke. Murphy was a fallen-away Catholic, and over the years he had forgotten a lot of the Catholic terminology. He also worked at a lumber yard, and every day, he's also a thief. Every day at the end of his workday, he'd steal a piece of lumber when nobody was looking. So he runs into a good priest, and he has a conversion. He's going to come back to the Catholic faith, and he's told the first thing to do is make a good confession. So he goes into the confessional. He tells the priest 30 years worth of sins. And finally, he wraps it up by saying, and Father, one more thing. He says, I'm working this lumber yard, and every day when no one's been looking, I've been taking a piece of lumber. So the priest, through the power of Jesus Christ, absolves him of his sins and says, and Murphy, for your penance, can you make a novena? Murphy says, well, Father, I'm not really sure, but if you've got the plans, I've got the lumber. All right. One song before we continue and get serious. This is a song entitled Dear Old Donegal. It's a guy that's come to this country from Ireland. He's now heading back, and he thinks there's going to be a big party for him when he returns. So here's the song. It seems like only yesterday I sailed from out of Cork. A wanderer from Erin's Isle, I landed in New York. There wasn't a soul to greet me there, a stranger on your shore. But Irish luck was with me here, and riches came galore. And now I'm going back again to dear old Erin's Isle. My friends will meet me on the pier and greet me with a smile. Their faces sure I've almost forgot, I've been so long away. But my mother will introduce them all, and this to me will say, shake hands with your Uncle Mike, my boy, and here is your sister Kate. And there's the girl you used to swing down by the garden gate. Shake hands with all the neighbors, and kiss the callings all. You're as welcome as the flowers in May to dear old Donegal. They'll give a party when I go home. They'll come from near and far. They'll line the road for miles and miles with Irish jaunting cars. The spirits will flow and we'll be gay. We'll fill your hearts with joy. The piper will play an Irish reel to greet the Yankee boy. We'll sing and dance the whole night long. Such fun is never seen. The lads will be decked in corduroy, the collings dressed in green. There'll be thousands there that I never saw, I've been so long away. But my mother will introduce them all, and this to me will say, meet Brannigan, Fannigan, Milligan, Gilligan, Duffy, McCuffy, Malachi, Mahone, Rafferty, Lafferty, Donnelly, Connolly, Dooley, O'Hooley, Maloney, Malone, Madigan, Cadigan, Lanahan, Flanahan, Fagan, O'Hagan, O'Houlihan, Flynn, Shanahan, Manahan, Fogarty, Hogarty, Kelly, O'Kelly, McGinnis, McGinn. Shake hands with your Uncle Mike, my boy, and here is your sister Kate. And there's the girl you used to swing down by the garden gate. Shake hands with all the neighbors and kiss the callings all. You're as welcome as the flowers in May to dear old Donegal. Thank you. I've now ask Colby Mazzarella, our president, to give an address. Colby.
Welcome to this event celebrating the 50th year of the Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund. As you heard, it started small, as all great things do, in the living room of the Scarpatos. And from the beginning, we focused on the free speech rights of sidewalk counselors. And we had some of our biggest wins, out of many wins, and quite a number of Supreme Court cases. Some of our biggest wins were the buffer zone, which, thank you. Thank you. The buffer zone around abortion clinics was legislated to be a limited speech zone in Massachusetts. And we took that case with Eleanor McCullen as a plaintiff, and Ruth Schiavone was in a different case, I believe, if I remember. And we won unanimously, even though all the Massachusetts courts, all the way up appeals, and everybody except the Supreme Court said, yes, you can have content-based restrictions where the pro-abortion people can speak on the public sidewalk and the pro-life people cannot speak on the public sidewalk. So the Supreme Court said there is freedom of speech on the public sidewalk and it can't be content-based. This is completely unconstitutional. So there are no more zones like that. If you see a circle drawn around the clinic doors, it is not a zone where you cannot speak. We have also defended peaceful civil disobedience. And in the Operation Rescue days in Massachusetts, we did defend numerous peaceful demonstrators. Because if you think about it, if an unjust law is no law at all, then an unjust conviction is no conviction at all. And we won on numerous cases, and that is in our system. That is how unjust laws, that was one of the main ways that unjust laws get overturned. That's what stopped segregation laws. That's what stopped slavery. Numerous laws related to slavery was peaceful civil disobedience. And we are very honored to have numerous people who have given up their freedom for long periods of time in the pursuit of overturning abortion laws. Any law that devalues some human rights, says certain category of humans is not qualified to have equal rights, that's an unjust law. And our system, our values are that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Nobody can take away those rights except our Creator, because that's who gave it to us. So we will continue to support and peacefully protest, and sometimes some people will continue to peacefully disobey the unjust laws in the hope of overturning them. So I am very, very grateful. Our whole board could not do these things without you. We have new initiatives, and we'll tell you more about them, but we could not do any of this without you. So thank you very much.
You all may remember Phil Moran, past president of the Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund. He's been in the hospital for the past 3 months, and I'd ask for prayers for him. He's upcoming, he and his wife Carol are coming up on their 65th wedding anniversary, but he could use some prayers. I want to recognize some pro-life luminaries here. I see Professor Dwight Duncan out here. He's brought a lot of students with him. Dwight is a law professor at UMass Law School. He's also a canon lawyer, and he was involved in the abortion buffer zone litigation in the appeals. He did a great job. I'd also like to recognize the greatest of all sidewalk counselors, Eleanor McCullen. And Eleanor was the named plaintiff in the Supreme Court case of McCullen versus Coakley, as you may recall. Eleanor also testified in front of Congress, I think it was last year or the year before, and she was so good that I had one of my brothers check it out. He doesn't know Eleanor. He just said, "That woman is a national treasure." So. And you can, if you Google Eleanor McCullen congressional testimony, you can hear her 9 minutes of testimony, and it's great. I'd also like to recognize Ruth Schiavone. Ruth was one of the original plaintiffs in the first buffer zone case. So she was a longtime sidewalk counselor. Also here is John and Muriel Ostrowski. They run Heartbeat Pregnancy Resource Center in Burlington, and they do a great job. They provide a lot of diapers, etc., for the needy women, and that's the reason lots of times they're giving birth because of these resources that are available. Also recognize here Jean Marshall, Will Goodman, and Paulette Harlow. You may have heard of their names. They were recently pardoned by President Trump. They put their lives on the line in a peaceful protest a few years ago, and they got arrested and sentenced to jail. So we're very honored to have them here. Also present is Rita Russo. Rita is the director of 40 Days for Life, Boston. And if you're not familiar with that, it's an international movement. The peaceful prayer out in front of Planned Parenthood twice a year, once in the fall, late September to November, and then during Lent, Ash Wednesday to Palm Sunday. They go every 2 times a year, and she does a great job. I think also here is Teresa Larkin. Is Teresa here? There she is. So Teresa is the executive director of A Woman's Concern, a pro-life pregnancy resource center in Revere, and she's also doing tremendous work. We have here Joe Doyle of the Catholic Action League. Joe is a great historian and puts out numerous newsletters. You are Joe. And if you want to know something about the history of Boston politics or pro-life, Joe's the man to go to. Also here present is Brendan O'Connell, founder and director of Life Matters TV. I almost drew a blank there. Life Matters TV, Brendan? Henry Lutine is here also. Henry is the past member of the Pro-Life Defense Fund and past chairman of the board of Mass Citizens for Life. Henry, here he is. I'd like to recognize a friend of Bill Cotter, a longtime pro-life activist, Sean Brogan. Sean has been out in front of Planned Parenthood and the other abortion clinic in Brookline for many, many years. And one of his claims to fame is back in the Operation Rescue days, he spent more time in jail than anybody else. So, I'd like to recognize another pro-life priest, Father Ron Taselli. I don't know if he's still here, but Father Taselli is a professor of philosophy at Boston College Law School, and he's also an author. He's written many good books, as I recall. Let's see. I'd like to have one of the young student leaders is here. I think I saw him, is Gabriel Dionisi. Gabriel, there you are. So Gabriel has organized a lot of pro-life standouts with signs, etc. So he's doing a great work. I'd also like to recognize Tom Walton. Tom has been instrumental in the successful flag campaign. He has flags like this behind me, and he's been very instrumental in the success of that campaign. I'd ask all students to stand up. Thank you. So this is the future of the pro-life movement. So we thank you for coming. And finally, I'd ask all pro-life sidewalk counselors to stand up. They deserve a lot of praise. It's hard work. It's self-sacrificing. And it's basically not easy to be out there. And I know some of them are out there this morning in the rain. So, but there have been a lot of saved lives because of their work. So, I would now ask past President Attorney Bob Joyce to introduce our special guest.
Thank you, Tom. There are some people who think a lot, and others just a little. Bill Cotter is a person who thinks a lot. And there are some people who pray a lot, and others just a little. Bill Cotter is a guy who prays a lot. And there are some people who pray a lot and think a lot, but don't do a lot. Bill Cotter does a lot. And he does it for all the right reasons, over a long period of time, in many forums, at great personal expense, and with relentless courage. Bill's thinking and his praying has inspired him to defend what has been described by our esteemed colleague, Mary Ann Glendon, the professor emeritus at Harvard Law School and former United States ambassador to the Vatican, as the most important human rights issue of our time, the defense of the unborn. And what the father of the pro-life movement in Massachusetts, Dr. Joseph Stanton, described as our highest privilege and most profound obligation, the defense of human life in its most awesome and fragile beginning, across the long day, and at its so often dependent close. And how long has Bill been doing this? For over 40 years. And in what venues? Outside abortuaries, before legislative chambers, before administrative agencies, at churches, at colleges and universities and high schools, and with innumerable young women who are with child. And by the way, let's never talk about pregnancy again. Let's talk about a woman with child like Mother Mary was and like Elizabeth was. And he's done that phenomenally. At what expense? Literally, at the expense of his blessed liberty. Bill spent 19 months incarcerated for his peaceful civil disobedience in defense of the unborn. And even at different expense, a man with Bill's intellect and talent and energy could have made a fortune in the private sector. But that's not what he was about. He was about other things more important, all the right reasons. Bill founded Operation Rescue Boston, was its first president, and has served in that capacity for 38 years. He co-founded the Catholic Action League of Massachusetts and has served on its board of directors for 30 years. He served on the board of directors of the Massachusetts Citizens for Life. He helped found the Pro-Life Coalition of Massachusetts, which has vigorously encouraged Catholic institutions to do more than talk about the defense of life, but to act more consistently with the guidance of the United States Catholic Conference of Bishops. Bill understands that this is actually a fight for life, and he knows how to fight. Not with guns, not with gasoline, not with fists, but with love and with logic and with determination and with courage. To me, Bill is the epitome of a poem that I read 40 years ago when I was a young man. It was called Winning. I'd like to share just a few of those lines with you. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of self-control and some grim determination if you want to reach a goal. It takes a lot of striving and a firm and stern set chin, no matter what the battle, if you really want to win. You must take a blow and give one. You must fight and you must lose, and expect that in the battle you will suffer from a bruise. But you mustn't wince or falter if a fight you once begin. Be a man and face the battle. That's the only way to win. Bill has been bruised, but he's still fighting. Bill is a winner, and under his leadership and with the grace of God, we will win this fight for life. And so, it is my distinct honor and privilege to present the 2025 Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund Thomas More Award to William Bill Cotter.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Good, good. Well, thank you very much, Bob. Thank you, Colby, and everybody else here for your gracious nomination and election to this award. It's humbling, and
Mike, closer.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna hold it steady, right? Okay. It's humbling. It reminds me of Father Tom DiLorenzo. He was didn't make it today, but he was invited. And one time on his radio program, he reminded us that all of us, as believers, we have an obligation to encourage one another. Because if you're a believer, you're in the fight. And the fight is, multifaceted for many aspects of the issues, fighting for family, fighting for justice, et cetera, et cetera. And he said that it's important. He said some people have the gift of encouraging one another. And it's an often overlooked gift, because you may think, well, this one's doing a good job, this one is great, he's got all the advantages, things are working out great. And he said, but remember, we all have an enemy. And the enemy is always whispering in our ear, forget it, it's a waste of time, it's no good, you're going to lose. He says, so therefore it's incumbent on us, and it's very meaningful and productive for us to help us to encourage one another. And that's what you're doing here today, and I thank you for it. So these, it again demonstrates the worth of these kinds of events, these gatherings. And even just your, our own small gatherings. We get together, have a cup of coffee after, sidewalk counseling, or you have a little rosary group at your parish or something. Well, there's only 3 of us. Well, thanks be to God. you have the three, you can pray, your prayers are efficacious, and, you know, you're encouraging one another in the flesh, not just, you know, through the cell phone. And that's been, an encouragement to me, because people have asked me, and reporters have asked me over the years, what is it that keeps you going? And just as an aside, you have to be, I remind myself, you have to be careful of reporters and some of the questions they pose to you, because a lot of the reporters, if they're left-leaning, which is about 99% of them, their worldview is such that what they're really asking you is, how did you become mentally ill? Why are you devoted to this? What is the cause of your, obsession with this abortion issue? And, but some of them rephrase it as, what keeps you going? And I think, they can at least appreciate that being a pro-lifer has, some effort and some obstacles that are involved. And I always say, number one, the grace of God, and number two, the friends and companions that I've had over the years, people who have been arrested with me, people who most of all, just people who show up on the sidewalk. It doesn't have to be someone who's, backslapping or whatnot, but people who are there to be in solidarity, whether you can be just standing off in the corner holding a sign or, praying silently or something, you're there, and that means a lot to me, over the years, and still does, when I'm out there on the sidewalk, as many of you here are, you know what it is. And you know also that it's part of the job description is you get not just, the devil whispering in your ear, but you get, vocal, little devils, devil's disciples who come along. And we had a guy come the other day, and he turned around as he went by us, and he kind of an ordinary guy, had a sport coat on, and never saw him before, but he turned to us and he said, I hope God damns you to hell! And then he went down to the next guy, and at the end of there, Bill House was down the sidewalk a little bit holding his sign, and he had a similar best wishes for him, too. And then you have people to stop and say, you're losers, you're losers. And now our friend Bob here reminds us that we're victorious and we've persevered to victory, And even though we haven't seen much of the victory we desire materialize, we saw Roe versus Wade fall, and we're hoping for more, and so on. But then there's been a lot of these petitions where states have, gone extreme the other way, abortion up to birth, and they'll probably be pushing for more in some future referendum. But, when somebody somebody just said to me today, we stopped and there was three of us praying there out in front of Planned Parenthood, and he said, you look like three losers. And, so before I don't think he heard me, but I said, no, we can't lose, we're winning. And we are winning, because even if we're, and I mean that sincerely, not that I have some utopian vision of victory for the pro-life movement and human life amendment and all that. I'm actually rather a pessimist, And but even if I'm the last pro-lifer on Earth, I've still won for that, because this world is not the end. It's not the last existence we're going to have. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about, reflect a little bit on the sidewalk. I know a lot of you are, veterans of being out there or being, with me in jail or at the State House or whatever, but it's worthwhile to give some reflections, because we always want to be better. We always want to have the proper appreciation for what we're doing, what we can do, and also to fight our own inner obstacles. Of course, one of the big ones is discouragement. And one of the things that adds to discouragement, or could if you let it get to you, is you have those hecklers who come along. And what has occurred to me about the sidewalk, just observing myself and other pro-lifers out there, like we had the monthly Rosary Vigil this morning over at Planned Parenthood with the helpers of God's precious infants. And it's striking how the events of Calvary are reflected and actually, manifested, audibly, visibly, right there on the sidewalk. Christ was hanging on the cross, suffering, bleeding for hours on end, apparently a criminal, naked, humiliated, and what did people do? They heckled as they walked by. And there's a verse, and I think it's in the Gospel of Luke, as they walked by and looked, they wagged their head. And that's something, I don't know if it's just intuitive, people who don't like godly things or whatnot, but people going by Planned Parenthood, they wag their heads, they can't understand, what's the matter with you people, and that, unfortunately, is that byproduct of that corrupt mindset. So there's that, and then they may have some verbiage, and surprisingly, many people who go by pushing baby carriages have their children, or somebody's children, maybe they're the nanny, and they, either will, they might not say anything to us, but, they'll always have compliments for the clinic escorts, Planned Parenthood's escorts. Thank you for being here, thank you for your service, thank you for volunteering. And then sometimes I think, I don't always say it, but everybody in hell is a volunteer, just in case you didn't know. But these, but anyway, there are these things, and then just, you could go days, weeks, months, and years, and you won't see personally somebody who decides to save their baby because of what you did, what you said. Other times it's very easy. You hardly have to do anything. First one this year was over on Harvard Street in Brookline. And I was told afterwards that, we had a save today, and it was just, they saw us out here, they said, we saw you, and we're going to keep the baby. And then they leave. Great. I remember one time somebody got off the, I don't know if they got off the bus or something, but they were coming into Planned Parenthood, and they didn't even go in. I said she, I shouldn't say they, but she didn't even go in, and she just said, and this is paradoxical, but there are these paradoxes. Before I came here this morning, I prayed. And she said, I asked God, if you don't want me to do this, give me a sign. And so she came up to us and said, you're the sign. Strange. We didn't say, oh, no, we're not a sign. No. It's, we're quite grateful for that. And it always is a great joy when someone tells us they've had a baby saved. And we had one, and sometimes we get delayed reactions. Somebody comes by, and this happens regularly. Not often, but it's a regular thing. Someone will come by and say, I was here 14 years ago, and I was going to have an abortion. Somebody gave me a brochure on the way in. I went in, I was thinking about it, and I changed my mind. I said, but I came out, there was nobody here, no pro-lifers. And she said, I just want to stop, say thank you. My son is now, 15 years old. He's in high school. He's doing great, and blah, blah, blah. And we had one just, I think it was 2 weeks ago on Saturday morning. A guy came by, and he drives for the MBTA, the ride, it's for help people with disabilities. And he was just smiling, joyful, excited, and he motioned, one of the people over to the car, Pat O'Donnell, sitting right over there. And he got talking with him, and then Pat motioned me over, and he was just telling us, our baby, well, actually, it wasn't his baby because it was his sister-in-law's baby. He said that he was here with her last spring, I think during the 40 Days for Life campaign in the spring. And he was just overwhelmed by, what he heard with the help he got from the pro-lifers there. I don't know exactly what was said. I wasn't there that day, and if I was, I didn't notice it. But he spoke with one of our participants there at the Spanish vigil, who is a deacon, who is transitional deacon. He's over at John the 23rd Seminary. He's going to be ordained This next month in New York City, in the Brooklyn diocese, which, by the way, is where Monsignor Riley is from, the late Monsignor Riley, and who knows, maybe Saint Riley at some point. But in any case, he said something, talked with him, the guy appreciated it, they left, and the baby was born sometime around the 1st of this year. And so he, stopped to give his thanks, and it's quite a contrast, and those are in the minority. Let's be honest. The people going by most of them ignore us, but some just kind of look down their nose, at us. But compliments are not free flowing, shall we say, to the pro-lifers there on the sidewalk. So there is. Then occasionally you get the vandals or the assailants. Somebody might push somebody, or the aforementioned Pat had coffee thrown on him one day, and other people have been assaulted. Other people have been assaulted, so it does raise the question of, though. I mean, we're strangers to those people. We have nothing, any personal relation with them. What is it they hate about us? And I think, again, you have to go back and ponder, Christ on the cross. And he was there, like I said, humiliated, naked, bleeding, of no threat to anybody physically, and yet they hated him. And how come? And I was thinking about that the other day, and there's a number of reasons I think you can come up with. I mean, Christ did say that, I'm the light that came into the world, and people who live in darkness hate the light. So there is that natural aversion that's there, repulsion, and if they see that you're in the light, and I think that's a unintentional compliment they give us, they're going to hate you. And I think also they realize that as they look at us, ponder what we're about, and the whole abortion issue, see the pictures of our preborn children, I think they know, maybe unconsciously, but know that if those people are right, then I'm in a lot of trouble. And I hate that idea. And so they want to, through their violent words, their contempt or whatever, try to dismiss us, put us out, their mind and so forth. But as Jesus said, when they persecute you and so forth, learn to rejoice. And that's one way you can get over being discouraged. You're going to embrace the crosses, the little crosses, and even the big crosses. And that's a key to life. That you're going to have obstacles in life, just routine, mundane obstacles, little problems that come up, a little cold maybe, or aches and pains, or it's people cursing you out. And and some people are intimidated by the prospect. I wonder, I think we're all friends here, right? Okay, I was going to tell you a little joke that's kind of a true story, I think. It involves a little ecumenical humor. My friend, the Reverend Joe Foreman, he's a Presbyterian pastor, or at least he was. I don't know if he's still pastoring a church, but he recounted to us some years ago, many years ago now, how he was trying to convince a friend of his to come out to the abortion clinic and join the people down there. And the friend said, well, it's a great thing you're doing, Joe. I mean, but I'm not comfortable, I think, going out there. He said, well, why not? He says, well, I've driven by there, I've seen the people out there, and there's a lot of Catholics out there. And I'm just afraid if I go out there, somebody might think I'm a Catholic. And so Joe said to him, now Joe's the Presbyterian, remember, he said, well, if you don't come out, somebody might think you're an abortionist. And by the way, I meant to start this talk with a little self-promotion. We have a table out there with our mailing list, if you're not on it. I think probably most of you are who want to be. Email list. There's a print newsletter we just published, and you can sign up for that too. It's all free. There's some good books out there to help encourage you in your faith walk. And so please do that before I forget, if you are interested. And the books are free, or just for a free will offering, and it can be a penny, it can be $100. And unlike Dunkin' Donuts, I do accept 50s and 100s, so. So a couple of other things here. It was supposed to be a gathering of, for a joyful gathering, but we are, pondering this heavy issue here. And so I wanted to talk about the whole issue of, getting discouragement and so forth, and, what can we do? I think, we need to realize, I hope, if you're realists, you've realized, what Christ had said, that basically life is going to be a series of crosses. It's going to be difficult. You've got to take up your cross. And in the narrow is the way, and there are few people who find it. So that's why I'm pessimistic about, will America ever become, a pro-life country? Will there be a human life amendment? Will all be pro-life and, the golden age and all that? And, I don't think they will. But, I'm not a prophet either. It's just my opinion. But, Jesus did say, when I return, will I find faith on the earth? So that's kind of, another way of saying few there are who find it. There will be few. And history shows, biblical history and other history shows that when nations go downhill in a big way, and ours has gone down in a big way, and maybe, the economy picks up here and there, but nevertheless, the whole Western civilization, Europe, America, North America, there may be exceptions in South America, but we have, the birth dearth, shortage of children. People are not getting married at the same rate, not getting married as early, fewer children, and populations are all declining, even in China, which, got rid of its one-child policy. Now you're allowed to have 3, but, they're not picking up on that so much, so they're not, replacing, and they're getting older, and they realize even though they've got 1 billion people, you might think population's not a problem for them, but it is in Europe. Father Marx of Human Life International said, many years ago, I think it was back in the 1970s, he was said, in 25 years, or I think he might have even said by this year, 2025, France will be a Muslim country. And if it's not, it's very, very close. And of course, churches are closing over there, and all through Europe. Ireland, Ireland voted itself abortion, voted itself same-sex marriage. And so the outlook is not optimistic. But that doesn't mean we should be discouraged, because whatever, I like to remind people of the North American martyrs, Jesuits, who went to the Canada and New York area, and they were there 11 years, facing opposition, discouragement, threats and whatever, hostility, as well as some, good cheer as well. But it was 11 years before they had their first baptism. Something to ponder, when you're out wondering when's the next woman going to change her mind here. But we are nevertheless having, babies saved at the abortion clinic. We had 12 last year. Now that's small compared to some of the previous years. I have a list here, just to take a couple of them. 2011, we had 119. And the following year, 74. 99 in 2009. And years go on. Of course, one thing that accounts for it is the reduction in abortions. Fewer people are getting abortions, which is good. But on the other hand, it's not a sign of a revival in terms of chastity or whatever. I think, the world is, fertility is down. I read that, testosterone levels, for example, even in young men, are lower. People are marrying later. And overall, the things that are very measurable, abortion rates, are somewhat measurable, but California doesn't report. We don't really know how many pills are being used and whatnot, but we have a pretty good handle on birth rates, marriage rates, and how many people are in church. And all of those are going down. And so that's the trend. Whether it continues, who knows. But just to touch on politics for a moment here, C.J. Doyle, the aforementioned and the great American, he had a little item in the other day. He'd mentioned this before. He talked about the Republican Ron Kaufman, who used to be an advisor to Presidents Reagan, President Bush, and he was held office in Massachusetts, and then he was involved in helping candidates campaign for office. And it says here in Joe's newsletter the other day, for many years the Massachusetts Republican Party operated a campaign school in the town of Needham, the candidates in state and county elections. Before graduating, every aspiring GOP office holder had to undergo a final interview with a long-serving Republican National Committeeman from the Bay State, Ron Kaufman. And his final word is, Kaufman's injunction to the graduates was simple and absolute. Never, ever talk about abortion. I remember when I read that one, it was a few years ago, he had repeated that anecdote, and I said to him, I wonder if there's a similar injunction and the similar admonition among the clergy of the church, because we don't hear much from the pulpit, let's face it, unless you're in a very unusual parish. There's a couple of friends of mine and I, from our Respect Life Committee, a parish committee, we went to see our Bishop McManus in Worcester. We made an appointment, and about 2 years ago we saw him and kind of laid out our concerns, as pro-lifers, that church is in crisis, everybody knows that, and you look at the diocesan directory, they have the number of funerals, the number of baptisms, and the funerals is bigger than the baptisms, and we know that if you look around, you're an active Catholic at all, you know that churches are closing, they're joining up in coalitions or what have you, but fewer people are going to church, fewer dollars are coming in, and there's like I said, fewer babies are being born and so forth. And so for the greater society, that's a terrible problem, because you have more and more people who are not nourished on Scripture, on the faith and the sacraments and so on, and they are susceptible to the dark side very much. And you see that if you read the news and are paying attention, it's very obvious. And so we said to the bishop that this is during the time of the Eucharistic revival going on, that it's an opportune time to use this program to energize people's devotion to the Eucharist, to make them more conscious of what's involved in the body and blood of Christ and the atonement that Christ made and so forth. But we think there's another aspect that needs to be stressed, sort of a John the Baptist revival. And John the Baptist's mission was, of course, to prepare the way of the Lord. And that was done by having people confess their sins. So we suggested to the bishop that it'd be good to have sort of a team or whatever, or individual pastors or whatever, to take up the crusade within the diocese to, during their Sunday masses, preach about the sacrament of reconciliation, confession, the need to make a good confession, the need to confess especially and to name from the pulpit the sins against life which are draining the church of its vitality, both spiritually and numerically. And he listened to us, and he was very receptive. We had a great meeting with him. It was about an hour and a half he gave us, and he said, "I agree with everything you said." And he said he would take the document, a 4-page document, and he would bring it to his presbyteral meeting, which was going to be the following week, and then hopefully it would trickle down from there to the various pastors. But unfortunately, he did say, I'm not going to mandate it. So without the mandate, where did it go? I don't know. I haven't heard any, anybody come up to me and say, well, my pastor has really had a great, pro-life homily the other day. But whatever. We made our offering, and I'm sure God will bless it in one way or another. Even when the bad things come our way too, just as a talk about the cross again. Remember the words in Scripture in the end of Genesis, talking about Joseph, who was sold into slavery and ended up being the kind of a mediator / savior of the people in a temporal sense there, and the money line in Scripture was what man intended for evil, God has used for good. And that happens every day. We're not conscious of it necessarily. It's not always in such a prominent way, but if you look in your own life, your own problems, your own limitations, your own crosses and so forth, going to jail or whatever, there's a way that it redounds, and like those people who come back to us and thank us 2 years later, we never knew them, we never saw them, we thought we went down there that day and maybe we wasted a time, what good did it do, we don't know, and then you get the feedback. And what's going to be the consequence of that life that's born, who grows up and becomes, whatever, loved of God and another, witness for God, another incarnation, so to speak, of the Holy Spirit. So, regarding, the hopes for the church there, because it does, that Mr. Kaufman there, there was sort of a little anecdote I can relate that was told to me once by a sidewalk counselor over in Brookline. Many years ago, he was a seminarian then, and he told me, he's now a priest, still a priest, and he told me that in his class at St. John's Seminary, the professor told him that he mentioned that there was an editor of the Pilot, the Boston Pilot, the diocesan newspaper, who had written some editorials, sort of urging, encouraging clergy, deacons, priests to, bring up the life issues in their homilies. And this did not sit well with the professor. And so the professor and some colleagues went to the Archbishop, which was then cardinal law, and voiced their displeasure with what Phil Lawler had written. And subsequent to that, Phil Lawler was removed from the editorial position. So the professor told the class that the editor, Mr. Lawler, he said, he just doesn't understand that abortion is too complex of an issue to lend itself to homiletics. Now, I don't know if this is, a policy that gets done every year, because there's I think most likely the prosaic explanation is the real one, that priests, like any human being, politicians or whatever, they can sense, kind of read a crowd. They know that when you bring up, the most divisive word in the English language, abortion, it's possibly going to result in some, complaints. People are not going to like you. They're going to withhold donations or whatever. So it's easier to just, everybody knows, what the church teaches, and just let it slide. Unfortunately, the slide is downhill. So when we went to the bishop that day, I'd said to Bishop McManus that maybe we're not going to, if we follow through on this proposed project here, we may not turn the tide around, where we start, growing the church, but at least maybe we can to start with, hold the line, not have a parish or diocese, be reduced in numbers. It's like a ball club, they're losing. They say, okay, let's get to 500, and then maybe we can work on the, winning the division or whatever. And so, like I said, that hasn't, as far as I know, been manifest, but nevertheless, God will do what he will do. And I do think that, if you take up the cross and persevere and realize that, it's not going to be, an easy victory. It's just going to be a long slog. It's going to be taking up the cross. It's going to be, and that's why I like to encourage people, to pay attention to eschatology, solid stuff, with the church fathers, the catechism or whatever. Because, consider that the church devotes a whole season of every year to eschatology, the end times, the final judgment, etc. And that's important to dwell on and not obsess over, but to think of, because it's manifestation of the fact that we are going somewhere. And if you're living the faith, you're going somewhere good. The resurrection is the good news. And the resurrection is irreversible, and no, Planned Parenthood or no politician or no atom bomb or whatever is ever going to undo the resurrection. So that's in store, provided we persevere to the end. So I just want to close on one item here from someone I was kind of pulling for to become Pope. But by the way, just speaking of the Pope, Leo the 14th now, in case you missed it, there was some very good news on lifenews.com, that Catholics for Choice is very, very upset with this election. And because he has been vocally pro-life and strongly so in the past, and so they said that they hope that the pro-abortion Catholics, who are, they say, are 95% of all Catholics, will, petition the Pope and persuade him to give up this, anti-abortion posture, that he's involved in. But he won't. I don't believe. And anyway, just finally here, and is a statement. It's 2 paragraphs. I'm going to read it because I think it's one of my favorite quotes, and I think it gives us a perspective about how we should persevere and what our, circumstances we can suspect. This is Cardinal Sarah in his book, The Day is Far Spent. And so he says, however, he's talking about now Europe and crises and problems that have been manifest there. He says, however, I must add that in Europe, alongside the institutions that seem suicidal and decadent, there are true seeds of renewal. I have met many generous families that are deeply rooted in their Christian faith. I have also seen fine religious communities that are faithful and fervent. They remind me of the Christians who, in the twilight years of the Roman Empire, kept watch over the flickering flame of civilization. I want to encourage them. I want to tell them, your mission is not to save a dying world. No civilization has the promise of eternal life. Your mission is to live out with fidelity and without compromise the faith you receive from Christ. In that way, even without realizing it, you will save the heritage of many centuries of faith. Do not be afraid because of your small numbers. It is not a matter of winning elections or influencing opinions. It is a matter of living the gospel, not thinking of it as a utopia, but experiencing it concretely. Faith is like a fire. A person himself must be on fire in order to be able to transmit it. Watch over this sacred fire. May it be your heat in the depths of the winter of the West. When a fire illumines the night, people gradually gather around it. This must be your hope. And just in closing, I want to say, if you don't want to be mistaken for an abortionist, you know what you have to do.
Thank you, Bill. Bill was kind of subtle with his pitch, but the suggestion is we need more people out on the sidewalk. There are opportunities to be prayer warriors, just by support the sidewalk counselors through prayer. Rita Russo, 40 Days for Life, could use more people. You got to fill up all those hours. And Helpers of God's Precious Infants, which meets actually today, the second Saturday of each month at 9 o'clock in front of Planned Parenthood. They could use some support too. The hour's getting late. I do have one more song. It's going to take one minute. It's a song that I wrote, and I entitled it, sort of a grand title, The Pro-Life Fight Song. Okay, so here it goes. We're for the unborn, oh can't you see, we'll never give up till victory. Their lives are at stake, so whatever it takes, and day after day, we'll fight and we'll pray. They're human, they're living, they're growing, they're swimming, they're yarning, they're kicking, their hearts are a-ticking, and they're unique, just like you and me. The law allows them to suffer in pain, and we will fight on, 'cause that is insane. Abortion is health care, well that's a lie, but how can it be when you make someone die? Those lives are in danger like Christ in the manger, they need our assistance, will be the resistance, and we will fight on to victory. We're for the unborn, oh can't you see, we'll never give up till victory. Thank you. We are honored to defend sidewalk counselors like Bill and to join them in defending vulnerable human lives. We can't do it without you. Our projects are entirely funded by donations. In the center of your table are pens and donation cards in white envelopes. Donate any amount that you see fit. Help us to expand for another 50 years. The funds we receive go exclusively to Pro-Life Legal Defense Fund projects and student interns. So I will give you 5 minutes maybe to fill those out, and Colby Mazzarella and Patricia Stewart will come around to pick up whatever donations there are. Thank you. After that, we'll have a benediction by Father McNamara.